It's episode 50 of the Whisky and Things podcast, and as a special treat, we are joined by the co-founders of the Cooper King Distillery, Chris Jaume and Abbie Neilson.
Yes, and we'll be sampling some of their new make spirit, as well as talking about their incredible story that spans the globe from Tasmania to York.
As always, you can see some more whiskey-based content, images or videos of Dave's really bad hairdo on our social media platforms at Whisky and Things Podcast on Instagram and at Whisky and Things on Facebook and Twitter.
I'm not doing too well myself, mate. It would also help us if you rate, review and subscribe on all your favourite podcast platforms. Thank you.
You're listening to the Whisky and Things Podcast with Dave Giles and Nick Kent.
Welcome to episode 50 of the Whisky and Things podcast. I'm Dave Giles.
And I'm Nick Kent. Welcome. The big 5-0, everyone. The big 5-0.
We are officially at the point where we stopped doing the video series.
I was going to say that. Yeah, 2014. We got to 50. Decided to go bi-weekly or every 2 weeks or something. We
Monthly,
decided.
I thought, wasn't it? I can't remember. But then we never did.
We never did. We just gave up. We just gave up. Maybe it's time to give up now, Dave. What do you reckon?
Yeah. Well, we've already got episode 57 recorded, Nick, so I don't think that's happening.
I was hoping for a holiday.
Now, mate, does it feel like you've done more or less of these?
More.
Really?
I don't know. It's hard. It's hard work doing a weekly show. You did 2 of them, but I don't know. We're kind of in full swing now, aren't we?
Yeah.
So we'll keep going. We'll keep going.
It definitely feels like we've learnt more about whiskey anyway.
Yes, we have.
Talking of which, shall we just go and learn about some whiskey?
Yeah. Let's not drink one though. Let's not have a whiskey this week. Episode 50. No whiskey. No whiskey.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
So this week we're not doing a whiskey, but we're doing a distillery. So I found out about this amazing distillery called the Cooper King Distillery in just outside York, and it's an amazing story they've got, and I just really wanted to get it on, and it also ties in with episode 1. So I really wanted to do this. So we literally just finished recording with them, and they are a delightful pair. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Chris and Abbie, because you're about to listen to it.
Yes, you are. Don't turn off. Listen to it. Enjoy.
Whiskey! So, welcome to Chris and Abbie from Cooper King Distillery. Thanks very much for joining us.
Not at all. Absolute pleasure.
You're welcome.
This is our episode 50, so we wanted to do something special. So I'm going to let you in on a little story here, which is why I wanted to have you guys come on. So when in our very, very first episode, we had something pre-recorded from Nick being in New Zealand back when we could do things, right? And Nick went and met up with the people at the New Zealand Whisky Collection.
Yeah.
And tried some of their whiskey, and they were talking to him about Tasmanian whiskey, and he nodded along as if he knew what he was on about.
But the truth is... No, I was learning. I didn't pretend.
The truth is, neither of us had a clue about Tasmanian whiskey, because we were obviously starting this journey of learning about whiskey and all this kind of stuff. And then the other thing that's happened over this year is we've discovered English whiskey and how wonderful that is. So there's been this ongoing theme that we need to try Tasmanian whiskey, which we've not yet done, but also that English whiskey is a revelation. And you kind of combine both of those things. So I really wanted to try and get you on. I'm so glad we've been able to do it. So can you tell us about how Cooper King got started and how it links to Tasmania?
We can, and it's a bit of a mad one, if I'm honest. Just those of you who don't know, we were a self-built whiskey and gin distillery outside of York. And it all started maybe 6-7 years ago now. Abs and I were, at the time we were living in Leeds in our late 20s. I just qualified as an architect and Abs was a scientist, so just got a PhD, both pretty worn out. I mean, you were completely burnt out after...
Oh, so burnt out.
After studying work in the lab. We both qualified. We were working in our jobs for about a year, and it just didn't kind of feel right. And the people we were working with, no one particularly seemed that happy in their careers. All our friends at the time were buying houses and having kids, getting married, sort of settling down. We knew we wanted to do that one day, just not then. So we decided to disrupt things a little bit, and we quit our jobs and bought one-way tickets to Australia.
Nice.
Which you can imagine our parents at the time were horrified after finally putting us through education, thinking, yes, they've done it, they're there, I can forget about them. We ring them up and say, oh, we've jacked it in and we've got one-way flight with no plans.
I did 2 degrees in science you know what, I'm just going to leave and got the PhD for a pair of flip-flops and just go surfing for a bit.
It's not going anywhere, is it? The PhD's not going anywhere, so that's fine.
That was part of my argument.
So this is where the Tasmanian Collection came in. So one of my best friends was a perpetual traveller and had recommended Tasmania as one of the best places he'd ever visited, which is kind of high praise from Tom. So we flew over to Melbourne, a week there, then went straight to Tassie, and we absolutely fell in love with the place. I mean, something like a third of it is protected wilderness, like World Heritage Wilderness Site. It's pretty remote and rugged. But interestingly and sort of relevantly, one of their whiskey distilleries won the accolade of producing the world's best single malt whiskey about a month after we arrived there, which is pretty fortuitous. Now, we had friends back home with a whiskey blog, and we were opportunistic backpackers at the time. So we messaged them and said, look, we're over here in Tassie. Would you believe it? We're 20 minutes from this distillery. Basically, if you buy us some lunch and give us some petrol money, we'll go and visit and get some blog content and take some photos. And they absolutely leapt at it, didn't they? They were like, absolutely, go and visit all 3 distilleries on the island and we'll cover expenses.
Well, no, actually, what they said was go visit all the distilleries on the island. Now, I think they thought at the time there was 3, but it turns out there was 8 operational distilleries.
Oh, wow, okay.
Naturally, to fulfill the brief, we had to visit all of them.
Of course.
Yeah, we were very kind of lucky to have that opportunity.
Yeah, and at the time we were backpacking, we were living in an estate car, we were picking apples to extend our visa. We were getting, it was
1 cent per apple.
It was a pittance.
Wow.
But then on the weekends, we were driving out to these beautiful distilleries all across the island. I mean, we spent a couple of months visiting them all, and just very, very quickly fell in love with it, and how they fell in love with how they were making whiskey over there and the people behind it. And the first chap we visited was a rye farmer called Peter Bignell, a Belgrave distillery. He'd never made whiskey in his life, and one year he had too much rye whiskey and thought, I'm going to have a go making too much rye, grain, and thought, I'm going to try making whiskey. So he made his own copper pot still. He soldered it together with copper from fallen power cables, supposedly. Didn't ask too many questions of Peter. Produced this whiskey, which was absolutely beautiful. And when Noma, which for a while was the world's best restaurant, had a pop-up in Sydney, they stocked Peter's whiskey. He'd never made it before. He was he was just a farmer. It was kind of a theme, wasn't it, emerged amongst all these distilleries we visited, that the majority that had never made whiskey before, had no background, weren't Scottish, didn't have £10 million in the bank, but were making beautiful spirit.
It was a side of the industry which we hadn't been exposed to before, or I suppose we hadn't exposed ourselves to before. And then all of a sudden we were surrounded by these amazing people, which, it was like distilleries that were pretty much started on a shoestring budget, which blew my mind because it suddenly made it accessible. It were these really passionate people who were self-taught for the most part. And we kind of had this revelation that maybe we could do that. If we kind of put our minds together, we'd both been looking for something that was creative, that was exciting, something we could both kind of start together. We wanted to work together, but we just didn't know how. We both love food and drink, and then all of a sudden we were absolutely madly in love with this whole kind of craft distilling and the people and the place and the product, and having that really beautiful connection. And I suppose it was the romance of Tasmania. It was the fact that we just quit our jobs and we started on this new journey together, and it had all of the kind of romance around it. And we had open minds and open hearts. We thought, well, let's give it a go. Let's start our own. Obviously, with a few whiskies to help lubricate the idea.
That's where the best ideas come from.
That's it. I think you couple that with the Australian confidence in pretty much everything. So, you tell an Aussie, I've just quit my job and I'm going to set up a whiskey distillery and I've never done it before. There's no doubt, like if you said something to England, they might question it. But in Oz, it was just, a slap on the back. Oh, good on you, mate. When's it ready? Crack on.
Well, why are you talking about it? Just get doing it.
It
was that, Enthusiasm.
Yeah, it's pretty infectious.
So my understanding about Tasmanian whiskey is there's one guy in particular out there who kind of changed everything and got it started, and also had something to do with the law changing, which then meant that smaller distilleries could even exist when before they couldn't. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So you're talking about Bill Lark, who's kind of named as the godfather of Tasmanian whiskey. So he was the one who brought about the change in the law, which removed the minimum still size, which at that time you could only produce it on quite a large scale, which excluded lots of craft distilleries from opening up. And he it was quite a battle for a while, but eventually had the law changed, which then paved the way for himself to produce it. He was the founder of Lark Distillery. And then lots of other small producers could follow suit. And, at the time when we visited in 2014, there were 8 operational distilleries, and there's now,
I think it's something like 42 or 44. It's a huge number.
Just on Tasmania, or is that the whole of Australia?
Just Tassie.
Wow.
There's about 1 million people in Tassie, so there's a good ratio there, I think.
When we were there, it had obviously Sullivan's Cove had just won, the world's best whiskey, which suddenly put them onto the world stage, and they, became much more well known on the sort of whiskey scene. And we were there, at the time distilleries were kind of doubling, quadrupling production, so they're experiencing this really awesome kind of growth. So it wasn't, it was only a matter of time before other distilleries started to open up, and they've had so much kind of growth since then.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll get to it a bit later, but a similar thing is happening in England. So when we were initially doing our research, again, 6 years ago, I think there are maybe 8 distilleries, and we put together an English whiskey map, which I think at the time had maybe 14 on there, and now we're up to 24 with another 3 or 4, which people don't know about yet. So again, in England, it's, doubled in just a few years. So it's really, taking off here as it has over Tassie.
I think for us at the time, we obviously saw that there was potentially a gap in the market, back in England for that. I think because we'd seen this relatively new industry, go through this really exciting kind of phase and change, and lots more people were getting on board, lots more excitement on the drinking side of things, that we could see a similar thing happening in England. And we thought, well, let's be a part of that.
Exactly. Let's be a part of it. Let me go back to Tasmania before we get back to England. Yeah. So did you then get jobs working for a distiller or learn anything from them other than just your experiences of visiting the distilleries? Did you get an apprenticeship or something like that? Or was it just that the idea was formed there?
Well, at first we had to taste a lot of whiskies.
Yeah, so that first, it was maybe a few months of visiting these distilleries. Our questions as each distillery visit went on got more and more in depth as our knowledge rapidly expanded. So I'm sure by the end they were like, "What are you guys up to?" This is,
turn it on a binder.
And straight into the number of hours we ferment. This is pretty detailed.
You're sketching all their stills, I know, plans, looking at the blueprints. I know.
And being an architect, you're probably pretty good with a pencil.
No, we were open, and they thought it was brilliant and bizarre that, we were up in Yorkshire, not far from the Scottish border, that we were over in Tassie, the other side of the world, learning from them how to make whiskey and take that back to, an hour or so away from Scotland. But no, so we visited all those distilleries, but then we did some training. So there was a distillery over there called Redlands Distillery, and a fantastic head distiller called Dean. So we did some training with Dean, and Bill Lark as well, actually, spent a bit of time with us, which we were very, very fortunate. I think he's an incredibly busy man now. I don't think we'd be able to be so lucky. And with Peter Bignell, the rye farmer I told you about, we spent a bit of time with him as well. So we did lots of training. A
lot of it was just research as well. Pretty much textbook research, and we had to learn everything from scratch, the whole process. When we went there, we were whiskey drinkers. We didn't really know that much about the spirit. We had a basic grasp that, you needed barley, water, and it's a cask age, but that was pretty much it. So to go from that level to, well, hang on a minute, there's a lot more we need to know, not just on the production side, but on how do we run a business? How do we finance that? How do we build a distillery? All of those things we had to tackle alongside, sort of our sort of once in a lifetime trip to Australia as well. So we made quite a good use of our time. We tasted lots and lots of whiskies. Obviously, we had to train our nose.
We were there for 2 years. So we were in Australia. We went to New Zealand and to Oamaru, which I think where the whiskey.
That's where I went. Yeah, the whiskey collection.
Yeah, we sat in there as well. Sat in that whiskey shop, bought some whiskey.
Yeah, that's where this podcast started.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So we those sort of 2 years were learning, tasting, researching, speaking. I think one of the biggest things was speaking to people and making friends with the Tassie distillers who really welcomed us in. It was lovely, and we learned so much. But it was having the freedom of essentially backpacking and just earning enough to get you to the next town, if you like, and surfing in between and learning about whiskey. I mean, it was a bloody magic 2 years.
It sounds incredible. It sounds incredible. Time well spent.
You're listening to the Whiskey and Things podcast.
So then you come back with this idea of opening a distillery, and what were the steps there? How does one start? Obviously, I imagine finance is a big part of that, and I don't divulge your personal finances by any stretch, but there must be a lot of complications before you even get to the point of that idea to fruition. Forget the knowledge you need, just on a logistical level.
Horrendous.
That was probably one of the last things that we kind of tackled, really, was, we had a budget for it, and it was like, we kind of knew roughly that there were different options to finance it, but I don't think it was, we kind of put that to the back of our minds almost, because I think if we'd have known how much it was actually going to cost at the time, it would have been a non-starter.
Yeah.
Because, it cost us 3 times as much and has taken us probably 3 times as long. Mm. And had we known that at the time, I don't think we'd have maybe had enough gusto for it. But, we were quite excited about the idea, and we thought, well, if it's a good idea, we'll make it work. It will work. It had to.
But you didn't do it by halves, did you? Well, tell us about the still you're using.
Yeah, so the stills, man. The still we had commissioned and made in Hobart in Tasmania. So the still maker over there, wonderful chap, was a German boilermaker who emigrated to Australia and started making stills in Tasmania. Like, equally crazy story.
Yeah.
But produces fantastic whiskey stills. So that was made over there and then shipped over to us here. So I think it's the only Tasmanian still in the Northern Hemisphere, and it's sat, in the next room in rural Yorkshire. It's quite.
That's amazing. It costs you 3 times as much, but the detail like that, bringing the Tasmanian still over, that's incredible for the story and for the whiskey.
I was going to say, it's what we learned on. We learned on an almost identical still over there, and the character of the spirit coming off those stills is not necessarily better than anything over in the UK. It's just different. It's more Tasmanian. It's unique, and it's sort of creates the sort of whiskey we want to drink and enjoy. So
for me, there's an element of romance about it as well. Definitely. I fell in love with that still and that shape, and for me, that's kind of synonymous with a really, big life-changing event. So I, every day when I kind of walk into the distillery, it reminds me of that.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of the funding, so we wanted to crowdfund a part of it. We knew, kind of asked the bank for some money, and we were all excited about it, and presented a really thorough business plan, which we're really proud of. But yeah, obviously got knocked back. They were like, absolutely no way, because we were like, yeah, it's going to take 3 years before we can earn any money. That'll be all right.
You can imagine, 2 backpackers back from Australia, with grand ideas, a pair of flip-flops on and an Aussie pan and a twang. Like, can we have some money to build a distillery? Like, no, you can't.
Amazing.
Yeah, we had to think outside the box a little bit, and we did have some money that we'd saved up for a little house deposit. We put that into the business to we thought, well, that'll get us going at least, but it got us so far as put in a driveway and in a concrete slab, and then we had nothing. So
that was it. Yeah, unfortunately, we weren't and still aren't independently wealthy, so it was quite a struggle to raise the money, and we had to raise. I think we had budgeted. I don't mind sharing it. We budgeted about 150 grand or something. Not a lot, and it cost us just shy of $500,000. So it was.
Wow.
It was we were so far out. So, I mean,
we sold a portion of the company.
Yeah, sort of an equity.
So we've got a few investors, and we crowdfunded it as well. So we opened up the Founders Club, and that was, I suppose, quite a novel idea at the time, because we didn't have anything then. We were, selling the Founders.
An idea.
Yeah, you're right. It was just an idea. We didn't have really a building at the time. We had barely even a website cobbled together. But I think we were quite good at selling that idea and getting people engaged. And we wanted to share that process, because it was exciting for us to see something like that form, but to invite people along with it and to see how the spirit and the brand and the business kind of evolved, and have people to be a part of that. So we've now got over 500 founders in the club, which have got us up into production. They've helped funded the equipment, the building, everything.
We had no experience in running a business or setting a company up or selling equity or crowdfunding or anything. So it was a really steep learning curve. And I mean, it took us that whole first year back to sort of get the money up and running. And then we had to build the distillery. We didn't have a building. And we were lucky enough. Abbie's parents had a bit of land in an old stable block, which we bought off them, and we thought, brilliant, we've got a stable block, we'll convert it to a distillery. Got planning permission, so used my architectural skills at long last. Didn't put them to waste, and all that went through fine. And then when the building and engineers came out and looked at the old concrete floor slab and said, absolutely not, the big brewing vessels are going to weigh far too much, you need to pull the slab up, which meant we had to dismantle the entire building with just for the slab up and start from scratch. So that second year back, we self-built the distillery. So that was literally friends and family. We didn't have money to pay a company to build it, so we all pitched in and built the thing from scratch, which was another monstrous undertaking as well.
So we've spoke to a few other distillers over time who have started up. They all start selling gin because you don't have to wait 3 years for it to go in the casks before you can call it a whiskey and all that kind of thing. So you've been doing that as well, right? So you've been doing gin and vodkas, and how long did it take for you to get a product onto a website or somewhere that suddenly there was some money coming in beyond just the founders and the other investing you were getting?
Well, we came back, so we started to work on the business and set up the business side of things in 2016. In 2017, we'd finished the build, and then in early 2018, we had our first gin. So it was a few months to get to that point, and a lot of time on the still, because obviously, I'd never designed a gin recipe before. So that was, again, like another challenge, which we sort of hadn't envisaged. We kind of naively thought that we would maybe, some kind of products that we would sell would be malt-based products or malt-based liqueurs. Because at the time we thought, there wasn't really much we could bring to the gin side of things. There was so many great gins on the market, and whiskey was more of our bag. So we didn't really think anything of it. That wasn't the plan to go down the gin route. But the more and more people, mainly as part of the Founders Club, were asking for it, why we weren't going to do gin and that they would drink it if we did, we started to explore it a little bit, just kind of tentatively to see what botanicals we had around us. And we had some local lavender. Got some really beautiful lavender fields nearby. My father is a beekeeper, so naturally I'd want to use the honey in it. So that was a good pairing to begin with. But it wasn't until we came across a vacuum still, which is a little bit different to traditional gin distillation. So it's done at a much colder temperature. So the flavours that you get from cold distillation are really bright and fresh, they're really kind of crisp, vibrant flavours. It was when I tasted a cold distilled spirit that I thought, wow, this could be a bit different, and coupled with, those botanicals, which I mentioned, would be a little bit unique. And it kind of got me excited as a distiller to play and develop a recipe around that. So our recipe has always been designed for a cold distillation. That was a whole new learning curve, but that's been super exciting because it's really sort of pushed us to, I guess, develop the brand and develop the product. And we've got a really good following on the gin side, which I hope that we can just ease some of them over to the whiskey as well, or at least kind of, blur the boundaries a little bit between kind of whiskey drinkers and gin drinkers, and just get everybody to enjoy this, the spirit, just because it's awesome.
Yeah.
So your plan is to carry on doing the gin even once you get more whiskey out into the world? Yeah, definitely. Our two sort of main gins have we just announced last month they've become carbon negative, so the first in England to do that. So it's a sustainability kind of underpins an awful lot of what we do. So huge achievement with those two gins. So yeah, definitely want to keep them going, and we plant woodland for every bottle we sell as well. So the gins are kind of tasting good, but also kind of do good for the environment as well. So definitely, yeah, keep them going. And
that's incredible.
Big support behind them. So
obviously then alongside of that, you've been distilling whiskey, which obviously isn't on sale yet as whiskey because it needs to be in the casks for 3 years, correct?
Correct.
So we must be coming up to a first release soon then.
Yeah, we're not far. So August, well, we have the new make already. So that's the unaged spirit, which we've been sort of putting out there. The first sort of legally matured whiskey we have will be August 2022.
Right.
So a year and a half. It might be ready then. I think the important thing, we're not going to release it as soon as it's 3 years because it's whiskey. That's not what we're interested in. We're going to release it when it's absolutely beautiful and we're really happy with it. Perfect. So because we're maturing in small casks, we're maturing in 100-litre casks, which is something we learned over in Tassie. They mature a little bit quicker than, say, your larger 200-litre casks you might see in Scotland. So we think maybe 3 to 5 years that whiskey will be ready. But at the earliest, August next year, which isn't that far away. If you think how fast the last year was just for everyone.
Yeah, it's going to fly by. It's going to fly by. In this process, are you already taking samples from it just to see? Are you excited or are you being patient and leaving it alone? What is that process? Because I'd just be in there every day being honest, see what it's like today.
It's one of the perks of the jobs, isn't it?
I am a scientist, so obviously, naturally I want to collect a lot of data, and that means taking samples from the cask and monitoring the aging process. Not because we want to sample it, for taste purposes. Obviously, it's purely scientific.
Purely scientific,
absolutely.
But we're every couple of months we'll go and take car samples and then nose them, taste them, see how it's coming along. And we are actually, for our Founders Club members, we're sending them, that's really soon, in the next month or so. We do have a cask we've fully decanted. So we've emptied one cask, which is just over a year old. So it's the first ever cask stage spirit we're going to release, which is super exciting. And that's, can we say what it is?
It's an ex-bourbon cask.
Yes. Yeah. And it's stunning. So
nice.
Casks are maturing really, really well. We're really happy with how
that's such a nice idea that because you don't have to call it whiskey, do you? You can just say this is a cascade spirit made from the same process of distilling that whiskey is, and then you're not breaking any laws. But it's nice for you to be able to do that for your founders, so they're coming along on the journey, right?
Definitely, and that's the point from the outset, wasn't it? Is to let them, follow the distillery and the build and all the rest of it, and now to actually, try that spirit as it's maturing and then slowly sort of heading its way towards whiskey. We can't wait. Honestly, it's going to be so good to be able to.
Such a great idea. That's such a great idea.
Whiskey bots, roll out.
You very kindly sent us a sample of the new make. Now, we've not done a new make sampling on the show. We have tried new make. We went to Bimba in the summer because it's just down the road.
Is it?
It's literally, I can walk there. It's amazing. We started this podcast and then I was like looking for distilleries. And I was like, what? What? How does that work? It's just down the road. Anyway, so what you've sent us, it says it's batch 4. And it's 47%. So are you watering that down at all? Or sorry, I don't know if that's the correct term.
Proof down, David.
Are you proofing? Yeah, Nick's the technical guy here. I do the drinking.
Technically, it's watering down, but I'm sure there's a better way of putting it. A more scientific way, I believe.
Or is that how it's coming out the still?
No, so that is watered down. Yeah, so it comes off the still at around 73-74%. It's too strong to go into cask at that point. So if we were to divert that to a cask, we'd water it down to about 60%, depending on what cask it's actually going into. Then we'd water it for the bottling it as the new make, which we've bottled under our pilot series. We dilute it a bit further to 47%, and that's where we think it's got a good balance between the alcohol level and flavour. So yeah, it's a little bit watered down, but it's so that you can enjoy it as it is. But I add a little bit more water to it after pouring it, because I think it opens up a bit more.
Okay, I'll do that in a moment as well. Once I've had my first sample, it's very fruity on the nose, very fruity and floral. I'm getting all those big sweet flavours on the nose.
Yeah. On the nose for me, you know what this is? You know the dried mango you can get in packets? The stuff which is the most Moorish substance on earth. That is what this is for me on the nose.
There's a lot of mango.
Yeah, you're bang on it, because lots of mango. For me, I get a little bit of green apple. Some people get gooseberry in there as well.
Yes, I kind of get natural yogurt as well with new make. It's like a peach yogurt.
Yes, peach yogurt is definitely there.
Yeah. I actually bought, I've got some Buffalo Trace White Dog here, which I bought this week. Yeah. And for me, that is gooseberry yogurt. It's incredible kind of how similar it is. So this is like a apricot kind of yogurt for me.
Yeah, so lots of tropical fruit.
And you do get there's sort of caramel or toffee pennies or the malt as well coming through on the nose.
That's an incredible flavour.
Oh, that's so good to drink.
That's something with 3 ingredients.
I know, that it's such a fascinating... We absolutely love new make, and to be able to share it and try and promote it, because there's so much flavour and there's so much going on there. From, as you said, water, barley, yeast, and that's it. But obviously, everything we do in the production process helps create those flavours and helps give it that complexity.
But isn't it mad that that's barley that's grown in England? So it's floor malted barley, grown in England, but can produce such a tropical flavour.
Yeah,
that's insane. How long are you fermenting for?
It's about 6 to 7 days is a ferment. So it's really long. Long fermentation. So that's where we're getting a lot of the fruity notes coming through.
Yes. Is it only one still you're running?
Yeah.
So that's going to take twice as long. So obviously you usually have the wash still and the spirit still, so you can do things twice as fast. So that must be a long process for you then.
It is, yeah. It takes, all in all, it takes about sort of 10 days to do a full run. So one batch of, one brew, 1,200 litres, fills just over one 100-litre cask.
Right.
So, yeah, we're not producing a lot.
About a cask a week is what we're laying down. And obviously, as we expand, we'd love to get a larger still, and that would be our wash still, and this become the spirit still. But we'd already blown the budget 3 times.
Let's get some product on sale first. Yeah,
you said it is. It's a lot slower to work with one still, which I suppose is a downside in terms of our production capacity. But it has afforded us that extra time to just kind of stop. What does the spirit taste like? How can we change it? What do we want from it? We can really play with all of those variables. Fermentation, temperature, the speed of distillation, all of those things that affect it. Our distillation days are about 10 hours. They're really, really slow, but it means we can fully understand, how that grain produces the flavours that it does.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we can be really, kind of thorough in what we're producing.
Yeah.
I just added a drop of water and I've had another sip. And I was thinking this anyway, but the flavours are pinging out at me now. Yeah. It's like a tropical squash, but with vodka. Or not necessarily vodka, because you don't really taste vodka in it, but an alcoholic tropical squash, which is amazing. As you say, it's incredible to think that you're getting those flavours from English barley. It's crazy, isn't it? Obviously, the process of adding to the barrel, we've spoken to a fair few people over this year, and the wood so much to do with the flavour of the final product of the whiskey. I think it's great. Are you going to continue to sell this alongside the whiskey? Because this is such a good drink on its own. It feels a shame. I'm sure you're going to make great whiskey with it, but it feels a shame to not let people experience this if they can, because it is so good. And the wood is going to completely change it. So it's not going to be anything like this. Obviously, there'll be elements of it, but it's so important that this people can experience this and then compare it to the ones that have been in the barrel for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, however long you end up doing that for, and saying, wow, how can that happen?
Dave, I am so glad you've said that, because that is exactly what we're trying to achieve. New Make as a spirit is a bit of an underdog in the kind of whiskey world. Not many distilleries bottle it. Again, it's pretty precious liquid, but also some are better than others. But like a really good, interesting New Make is a spirit in itself, and it's there. It's just begging to be kind of played with and to be a cocktail based. It's a really interesting drink, or just to sip and savor it without the oak influence, because to really appreciate the process and the intricacies of the process, everything up to that point, can be quite overlooked in some, it's all about the wood and it's all about the aging process. And that is a huge part of it. But also, let's not forget just how cool this spirit is. Yeah. So the reason why we've bottled it, we're trying to promote it, is for people to, enjoy it in its own right. It makes a brilliant cocktail. One of my favourite cocktails with the New Make is, it's a take on a caipirinha, which is basically just muddled with lime and sugar syrup with crushed ice. And it is just an awesome cocktail.
Is that the off-kilter?
Off-kilter,
we have in here.
Oh, yeah, it's on your card. Yeah. Give that a go. It's absolutely super.
So you have cocktails and stuff on your website to make with your spirits as well, which is great. Your website's fantastic. The blog is fantastic. And again, you were kind enough to send us this 3-bottle set together with a vodka and a gin as well. And it has a accompanying video as well, which you can taste along with, which is another thing I loved. I may have had a little bit of Nick's special time with this earlier, actually. But yeah, it's well worth our listeners going and have a look at the website, because there are cocktails and stuff as well, because people don't think about making cocktails with New Make, as you were saying.
Not at all. And one of the greatest things we had not that long ago, there was someone from one of the villages near here came, and he was buying his wife a birthday present, and apparently she loves the New Make, and she's not a whiskey drinker, but her 3rd bottle of New Make. And I think you've really nailed it if you've got a non-whiskey drinker loving the taste of New Make, because that's our whiskey in its most unrefined state. That's the beginning, and if you've got someone hooked at that point, then brilliant.
It will be interesting to see if that same person then likes what you do with the wood.
And
whether it ends up being her gateway into other whiskies as well, because it's the flavours have begun to, she's got used to the idea of the flavour and the burn, or however she's drinking it.
We also have some people who have come to the distillery, so pre-COVID, when we were running tours, who were neither whiskey or gin drinkers, but they'd kind of been bought the experience as a gift, as something to do. They actually went away with a bottle of New Make because they'd found something that was totally unique and was like neither gin nor whiskey, and they found something that they loved, and they loved it because of the flavour. And so I love that you can, if you kind of strip away all of the preconceptions of what you think a spirit should be and just focus on championing that flavour, then there's a whole new kind of world to be discovered in that aspect.
Yeah.
If you think you don't like whiskey, then maybe think again. Or if you think you don't like gin, then, sort of break out of it. Yeah. Yeah. Just drink the New Make.
I did mention the wood, and by all means, I'm not sure how much people keep these things secret in the trade. So are you experimenting with a variety of different wood, or is it mainly just the ex-bourbon stuff you're doing, or have you got like different things in a warehouse and you're hoping to have a whole range of different wood finishes?
We do. So I guess partly because of our size and only laying down 50 casks a year, we can be very choosy and have taken the time to go and select those casks very specifically to sort of match our spirit. So we went to Kentucky January last year, pre-COVID, when you can get on a plane. Went to a fantastic bourbon distillery there called MB Rowlands. They produce superb bourbon, but they also do it as a corn whiskey, they do a malt whiskey, they do a rye. So we've now partnered with them. So we've got some rye and corn and bourbon casks directly emptied sort of at their distillery and then straight here, sort of door to door.
Wow.
Been filling, and they're wonderful. They're absolutely wonderful. And then the other side we're exploring is French oak. So we went over to Bordeaux, worked with a very experienced chap over there, and we've sourced some beautiful fresh red wine casks. We've got some Armagnac casks, some cognac casks. And our plan a few years down the line when the whiskey is ready is to have two distinct releases. We'll have a French oak and American oak.
Nice.
Both will pull our new make in slightly different directions, but just to celebrate the difference. I mean, the bourbons are they're so oaky, and they do a smoked bourbon, which is incredible stuff. And it will be a full-on robust whiskey. While the French oak will be, I think, there'll be much more fruity notes from the wine. You get a much more toasted oak coming through rather than the heavy chars, and a much more elegant spirit. But again, to be able to show how that oak influences, you've got the new make, which you can try, and then the two different sort of roots for the two different types of oak. Again, it's about sort of bringing people along for that journey and showing them what can be done with casks rather than just going for bourbons because that's what's easy to get hold of. Sort of made it difficult for ourselves, but it's worth it, I think.
Because you're an English whiskey or an English distiller, is it easier than if you had set up in Scotland? Do you think you have less pressure or expectation, or freer to experiment more than if you'd said, "Oh, we really like whiskey, we really enjoyed the experience. Let's go and get a plot of land in Scotland and do a Scotch"? Good
question. That's a really good question. I think it's easier in some ways because there is no expectation almost. We're a bit more free to innovate. We haven't got anything. If you make a Scotch, you have to kind of slot into that.
Into the legal framework.
You have to slot into that, and everybody kind of knows or has expectations of what Scotch could be. So it's harder to break away from that. In England, we haven't got the same level of regulation. So it is much more open for innovation. But then that's also the downside, is that we have to maybe work a little bit harder to prove that it's worth trying. I guess because Scotch has such a fantastic name for itself, and it is so well known that people often don't even think that they would have a local English distillery. They don't even think that they could buy local or support a local business. Or maybe they think, English whiskey can't be any good because how could it when we've got Scotland? So all of those are the things to battle with. But I think people are now open to much more than just Scotch.
And that happened in Tasmania as well. So when we went over and we were speaking to Bill and his sort of other, the chap called Mark there at Lark Distillery, and they were saying when they first started, there was quite a bit of cultural cringe, he called it. So people wouldn't buy Australian whiskey because, who's ever heard of that and why would you? But as soon as they Sullivan's Cove won the award, then suddenly it was like, oh, crikey, we do make good whiskey. Let's get involved. So I think probably a similar thing will happen with England, and it is changing. But the moment an English whiskey distillery, wins world's best whiskey, then I think everyone will come onto it much, much easier.
And you're there ready to capitalise.
I say, hurry up and do it then,
Yeah. So I have one other thing, which is about the sustainability aspect of what you're doing. So I know that the Scotch industry, and again, I know that's Scotland related, have had a big push to try and make their distilleries carbon neutral. Obviously, as you said, England is a different set of rules and things like that, but you yourself have said you've got carbon negative gins and products. So how important is sustainability to what you do, and what do you see as being the challenges behind that?
So the answer to the first one, how important is it? Absolutely integral to everything we do, and it all was born out of those travels. So as you know, at Tasmania with all the wilderness areas, and we lived and worked up by the Great Barrier Reef in Queensland for about 6 months as well. Beautiful, beautiful places, but also incredibly fragile. So soon after arriving in Tassie, there were wildfires that ripped through it, and obviously the Great Barrier Reef and the bleaching and everything that's happening up there. It made us realise that if we wanted to set up a business and run a business, that we wanted to be able to do it in such a way that would protect those places and also preserve more places maybe closer to home. Hence, the tree planting with a fantastic local charity. And so that's kind of where the idea stemmed from. And then putting it into practice, it becomes a mindset rather than just saying, oh, we're burning all this fuel, we better change that or think about that. If we've done it from the beginning. So, we've run on green energy from day one. We planted a woodland here on site. We've got 400 trees were planted here. Abbie's dad with the bees. The barley we're now sourcing from all within Yorkshire, we've got some of the farms, 15 miles away from us, and went out and rode the combine harvester last summer.
Nice.
Childhood dream come true.
Amazing.
Also because we're a new business and we wanted to be sustainable from the outset. In some ways it's been easier because you can question things from the start. Lots of kind of premium whiskies and premium spirits are bottled in really heavy bottles, with a big kind of chunky glass bottom. And it's a lot of unnecessary weight. And rather than just adopting that because that's what everybody else does and we should do the same if we want to kind of have the same level of shelf presence, well, sustainability is more important to us. So let's just not follow the trend. Let's buck the trend and just bottle it in a lightweight bottle, because ultimately the spirit should speak for itself and the packaging should be secondary. So just small changes like that. We haven't had to backpedal and make our business more sustainable. We've set out on the right foot, and we've still got lots of work to do to become more sustainable. But, turning the gin's carbon negative is one step. It's a pretty good milestone for us to turning the whole distillery carbon negative. And that will be much more of a challenge on the whiskey side of things, just because of that level. It uses such a lot of water, it's such a lot of energy. So it is difficult to do, but it's not impossible. And there's no reason why we can't all work together to try and, as an industry, make it so much more sustainable, because we have to. We haven't got a choice anymore.
Yeah, it's commendable that you've done it from the off as well, because I imagine thinking that way definitely adds more expense. And when you're trying to save pennies, but then you're also thinking, no, we have to spend that money because there's a bigger picture involved. And there's plenty of people who probably wouldn't. So well done for doing that, because I think it's really important as well. So nice work on that. But thank you so much for joining us and for sending us these samples and talking us through your story, which I really do think is amazing. And I wish you all the best when the whiskey starts coming out. And we'll post some links to your site and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully, can people still join the Founders Club, or is that now closed?
We've still got some seed memberships, haven't we? Which sort of
so there's a next level down kind of thing, is there?
Yeah, they're the last ones. All the others are sold out now, which is great. But there's still some seeds, and people just follow us on Instagram is always a good way as well to sort of keep up to date with what we're doing. But thank you very much for having us. It's been really good fun. I can't believe an hour has gone.
I know, yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun.
This is the Whiskey God, reminding you to please always drink responsibly.
Mate, how good was that?
That's wonderful, wasn't it? What lovely people.
Absolutely. And what a great story. What a wonderful story. Yeah, it makes it feel like it's achievable for all of us to go and start, to an extent, to if you've got the romantic idea of starting a distillery, then, just do it.
I had the romantic idea when I went to New Zealand of coming back and starting a podcast about whiskey.
And here we are.
Yeah, here we are. Isn't it? It's just as romantic, isn't it, Dave? You and me.
Absolutely.
Zooming every week. Yeah.
Absolutely. And our first new make, episode 50, and our first properly
new make,
tasted new make.
Yes. Yeah.
Feels nice right now.
It does feel
good.
nice.
I've got a nice smile on my face.
That new make, listeners, you're actually able to purchase from their website. It's the Pilot Series number 1. It's £35 for a 50cl bottle, and it's lovely. So I highly recommend that. Also, the sharing selection box they were kind enough to send us, you can also purchase that for £25. You get 3 100ml bottles in that, and as I said in the interview, you get a nice video to go along with that.
There's a variety of other gins and spirits on their shop as well.
Yeah,
and also you can join the seed package for the Founders Clubs. There are 3 different levels of Founders Club membership that you can be involved with, and unfortunately, there's only the seed package left, which is £30 to join. It gets you discount on various things and access to pre-release spirits and limited editions. So I'm not going to lie, I did. Just go and
you just did
up.
it. Just did it just now. So I'll do it now. Let's do it now. Why not?
Do it right now. But as always, you can watch the full uncut video. We were talking to him for about 50 minutes. It was really great. And that's over on the Whisky and Things Patreon page, which is patreon.com/whisky and things. And we're doing this very week, we're doing our 1-year birthday party with our Patreons as well. So, you've got a couple of days. If you've heard this episode on the Wednesday and you sign up before Sunday, you can come and join us on our birthday party.
Yes. And if you'd like to learn more about Cooper King, go to www.cooperkingdistillery.co.uk. On Instagram and Facebook, they are at Cooper King Distillery, and on Twitter, they are CK Distillery.
And obviously, we'll be putting those links in our description as well. But yeah, great people, great interview, thoroughly enjoyed that, and a great spirit as well. And I can't wait to try the whiskey. I think it's great that they're doing the 1 year sample as well. Their whole thing with the crowdfunding and the founders campaign obviously is so similar to the kind of thing I do with my crowdfunding projects as well, with like trying to bring people along for the ride and letting people. I felt like they were kindred spirits. Is that the right expression?
Do they do a tea towel?
Did they do a tea towel?
If they're not doing a tea towel, they're missing a trick, because that's funded your career as far as I'm concerned.
Do you know what? I might have to have a word with them about that. They do a hardback book about Yorkshire gin map. Oh, it's close. They could do that as a tea towel.
Whack down a tea towel. Just whack down a tea towel.
Exactly. I'll send them a message. Yeah.
Awesome.
Change their whole business plan. Anyway. Cooper King Distillery. Can't wait to
tea towels coming
finally
soon.
get round to trying their whiskey.
You're listening to Whisky and Things. These British people talk funny.
Boom. 50 done. 50 done. Now let's give up.
No, Nick. Before we're done, I've got something for you.
Oh.
It's a very wee nip of a bit of a booze round.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Booze round. Just a little one. Just a little one.
Make it quick.
So Bimber, we mentioned him in the interview today, but Bimber, who are my local distillery, like bear in mind I'm in London, they're only going to go and open up a distillery in Scotland.
Bimber Scotch. Imagine that.
Bimber are going to do a Scotch.
Is that all going ahead, is it? Has that been approved? And is that just a plan they're coming up with?
No, I'm pretty sure it's going ahead. So this was reported in thespiritbusiness.com. But I'm in a Bimber Appreciation Society on
me too.
On Facebook. And Matt McKay, our friend Matt, who was on the podcast when we went to Bimber, has posted within there. And he said that he'll be letting us all know further details as the plans progress. Please note, though we'll be taking some techniques and learnings from Bimber, this will be an entirely separate distillery. So although the company is going to start doing Scotch, I don't even know if it's necessarily going to be called Bimber.
Right.
But maybe it will, because the branding on Bimber, maybe this has always been the plan, because the branding on the Bimber bottle does say Bimber London. So maybe it has always been the plan to have other sites. But
no, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't? No. Does it not say London Whiskey on it?
It says London Whiskey, but then they'll just put Scotch Whiskey on the other one.
Yeah, well, that was kind of my point.
Okay.
You're splitting hairs with me there, Nick.
No, I'm not. It's single malt London Whiskey. Small batch.
London Whiskey is my point.
It's Bimber Distillery. This will be. Okay. They'll just release Bimber Distillery Scotch Whiskey.
Yeah, or it's going to be completely different. But anyway, it's exciting times.
Let's not fall out on episode 50, Dave. Let's not fall out. We've come this far.
Yeah, well, if you want to split hairs. It's fine.
Split ends at the moment.
I think this is interesting. And I think, bearing in mind, a company in England doesn't have the regulations that they have in Scotland, as we just talked about in that interview. I think it's interesting that they've decided to go up to Scotland and to try and take on that side of the industry. And I wonder what the thought process behind there is. Anyway, it's an interesting news story, and Nick will post a link to it if you're interested. But yeah, yet another new distillery in Scotland.
Yes, there you go. It's like Tasmania. They're just popping up all over the place, mate.
Popping up all over the place. Exactly.
Popping up all over the place.
There'll be Bimber Tasmania soon as well.
And I'll pretend to know about it.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks very much for joining us on the 50 episodes. If you've done every single one,
well done.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you. Yeah, well done for getting through it. And it's massively appreciated. And it's appreciated. Massive shout out to our patrons, obviously, for continuing to fund us. Anyone who's bought a t-shirt or anything like that as well. Thank you very, very much. And just for listening. And if you've pressed the share button, thank you very much. Hey, I've got 2 shout-outs very briefly, Nick.
Yep.
Someone new.
Oh,
At Baz Richardson, 84, has tweeted us. He said, anyone interested in looking for a new podcast, have a listen to Whisky and Things. It's educational, has interviews. Nick and Dave together have a good laugh, and can't forget about the Whiskey God. Who? My new favourite podcast is what he says. So hello, Baz. Thanks very much for getting in contact.
Thank you.
It's very much appreciated that you've done that. Anyone else wants to get in contact, please do. But also another shout out, as a result of Jeff coming on last week, I found out about this wonderful whiskey online club called Certified Originals, and they've got a Discord page, and they're really, really great. I mean, everyone in there is really supportive. Loads of people sharing whiskies and sharing articles and videos and our podcast. So anyone who's listening from Certified Originals, hello. And we look forward to they have various events as well, and there's a charity side of it as well. So I think we should get someone on from that as well. I think that would be useful in the future. Maybe we'll get Anthony to come on. Anyway, that's all I'm at, Nick. That's where I'm at. Let's sign off, shall we?
Should we sign off? That's been a good show. It's been a great show. Congratulations on 50 episodes, Dave. Well done.
And you as well. And you. Well done for putting up my voice for that long.
Well.
Amazingly, you haven't smashed your computer. You haven't picked it up and thrown it on the floor.
Well, you haven't been up here with me while I've been editing, have you? Yeah.
I'm sure there's been a lot of cursing.
What? What did you say? Just talk. Get the words out your mouth. Stop mumbling. Stop stuttering. Anyway, let's blow this popsicle stand.
Okay. Cheers. Thanks for coming. 50 times.
What a trooper.
Whisky and Things has been brought to you by And Things Productions.